From the studios of Cheshire TV in Keene, New Hampshire, it's The Men's Room, a show by men, about men, and for everyone. Sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center and hosted by Damien Licata and Forrest Seymour.
I'm Forrest Seymour. My co-host Damien Licata is not with us today, but we have a great guest. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation, and I hope you can stick around for the whole show, half hour long. At the end, I will talk a little more about our another program that the Monadnock Men's Resource Center provides, which is a drop-in support group for all men every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. For now, you'll just have to wait with bated breath to hear more about that. So I'm going to move on to our guest real quickly because I want to be sure to have time to spend with her. Our guest is Katherine McLaughlin. She's an educator and trainer for Planned Parenthood of New England, where she has worked for 18 years. She's lived in the greater Keene community for 20 years. She provides education in the community with young people and with parents around talking with their children about sexuality. She also does professional workshops for Planned Parenthood. And it's great to have you with us, Kath.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming into the men's room.
Yes, thanks for inviting me to the men's room.
Pretty exciting. So, but you sort of get to go in the men's room, as it were, figuratively speaking, a lot in your work. I think you work with a lot of adolescent boys as well as with girls. So I'm really curious to hear about that. But tell us something about what sort of your role at Planned Parenthood and what you do there.
Mm-hmm. Well, my job is to go out in the community and talk with lots of different kinds of groups about different topics of sexuality. So it might be high school students around pregnancy prevention, and or it might be parents on how to talk to your kids about pregnancy prevention or sexuality. And that's basically what I do in this community. I do professional workshops as well. Those tend to be more in the New England area than specifically in Keene.
For other people who do education around these kinds of issues.
Exactly,
with teens. Yeah.
Yep, so like health teachers may come to a workshop on how do you talk to young people about sexuality.
So you get to spend a lot of time, is it great big presentations or small? I mean, do you get to have real conversations with teenagers about their lives, their sexuality, what they're doing? Yeah,
oftentimes it's one or two sessions in a school. Sometimes it'll be like at Phoenix House in Dublin. I might go in and work for a couple hours.
Substance abuse treatment setting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they're staying there, and it's part of the program for me to come in and talk with them about sexuality. So it can be sometimes out of school, but usually it's in the school setting, part of the health curriculum. And I go in and talk about Planned Parenthood. And usually what people want me to talk about is pregnancy prevention and sexually transmitted disease prevention.
Right. So must be interesting.
It
work.
is.
Yeah. You've
It
done
is.
it 18 years. There must be something about it.
Right. Yeah.
What is it? What do you like about it? You seem excited about it.
Yeah, it's always changing. So the trends change around what's going on with regard to young people and sexuality. And I always have interesting projects that I can do. So one example is these parent house parties that I've been doing. And that's sort of like Tupperware style parties where you get a group of parents together, they invite their friends, and we talk about, what's on your mind regarding sexuality. So how do you talk to your kids? And oftentimes there's questions about, how do I talk to my son? And so, I just learn more and more about parents' perspective and what adolescents are thinking about, and so it's always changing. There's nothing boring.
Yeah. So what are you learning? I mean, what are some recent things that particular? I mean, I think I'm curious, and I'm sure our viewers are curious about both what's going on with adolescent boys, but also the parents as well, and what their experience is these days. What are you finding?
Well, I think that there's this idea that adolescent boys are irresponsible, which is not true. And the statistics are showing that adolescent boys are, when they interview, I believe it was 15 to 19-year-olds, or they surveyed 15 to 19-year-olds and found out how many were having sexual intercourse. In the early 90s, it was 60%. And now, or I think it was 2005, it was something like 47%.
This is of all adolescents?
15 to 19-year-old.
15 to 19-year-old.
This is boys.
Boys in
actually,
particular.
specifically boys.
So it was 60 and like now down to 40
Right,
something.
right. So sort of, I think there's a lot of ideas about adolescents in general, you know, sort of this idea that they're a problem and they're irresponsible, but in particular, there's a focus on adolescent boys being irresponsible. And another trend I see is this sort of idea that adolescent boys are irresponsible and all they think about is sex. And that's not true either. And adolescent boys have told me one of the things that's really hard for them is if they bring a condom with them, they are seen as pigs. All they think about is sex. If they don't bring one, then they're irresponsible. So they just can't win.
Yeah.
You know? And so these ideas we have about adolescent boys, I think we reinforce in different ways.
Right, right. I mean, the thing about the condom just captures sort of this ambivalence in our society, I think, in a way, about how, you know, we would rather if our teenagers were not sexual at all, like just that isn't happening in their lives.
Right.
But then we also want them to be, I mean, that's the part of us that wants them to be children. And then there's this other part of us that wants them to be responsible, adult-like, you know, doing the right thing, which means bringing protection.
Right, right.
You're thinking about that stuff in advance, not having unprotected sex, you know,
Right.
planning it out
Yes.
in a way,
Right.
which
We don't
Which
do.
we- yeah.
We don't see in the culture at all, or any kind of conversations about the sexual decision making, or how do you plan, and how are you safe. You know, a lot of the media shows, you know, no consequences of actions, and so we don't see a lot of it. And I think that parents are trying to do a better job than their own parents did. So when I work with parents, I say, so what are the messages that you got growing up about sexuality? And they'll say, none, no one talked to me, but I want to do it different. I want to talk to my kids, but it's hard. And sometimes it's easier to talk to someone else's kid than your own kid about sexuality, or have your kid go to someone else. And I'm always telling parents to, you know, have another person that's an adult that has similar values to you that your child could go to if they can't come to you. So I think for parents, they want to do a better job, and they're also really worried right now. So there's more of a panicking sort of experience.
That's such an interesting idea that you're suggesting about having someone else, like an uncle or a friend or a neighbor or somebody a trusted person who you could point your kids to. You can't talk to me about this stuff, go talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, I'd really like you to talk to me, but if you can't, here's a good person for you to talk with.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the whole extended family takes a village to raise a child kind of idea.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you know, one hears, being the parent of a middle schooler myself, one hears about these scare stories, maybe, you know, I don't know if they're rural myths or whatever, about you know, incredible amounts of promiscuous sex going on amongst groups even of teenagers. And you know, so you have traveled in the belly of the beast, so to speak. I mean, you have gone out there and talked with teenagers. I mean, what do you think is really going on? I mean, I know there's statistics, and then there's also like what's really going on in this community.
Yeah.
What can you share without breaking confidentiality with your the students there that you talk to?
I think that what can happen is stories, like you're saying, these legends can get sort of hyped up. People tend to talk to one another about them, but they weren't necessarily at this party, or so I think they kind of
hear, so and so, she's having sex all the time. You know, how do you know? Well, I heard it through. You know, I just know it. I can tell.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. Is statistics show that very, very, very few are having in middle school. I think the percentage might be 15 to 20% have had sexual intercourse. But these parties, this idea of groups of people, I think is very, very rare. I'm not going to say it isn't going on, but it's pretty rare, and I think that media can, you know, pump it up a little bit. so that we get really nervous, and then we come from a place of fear rather than a place of just responding. And I'm always saying to parents, don't react, respond. So when you hear these things, rather than really just respond. Like, okay, so if this is true, what do I want my kid to know? What are the values I want to tell them? And hope that they adopt those values.
Right.
So to just respond, and I think that's probably true with all kinds of parenting issues, that we tend to overreact.
But sexuality carries all sorts of other, there's one, you might be worried about how your kid is driving or how they're doing with academics or something, and you can respond rather than react. But around sexuality, it carries all this other weight, moral judgment and pregnancy and really long-term sexually transmitted diseases, so all sorts of really long-term stuff.
So no wonder people are worried. Absolutely. And so I think my focus with parents is just having them get more comfortable at bringing things up. And what I find is that it's usually the mothers that talk to both genders, but they have an easier time talking to girls. So parents in general are less likely to talk to boys.
So the dads aren't likely to talk to the boys or girls, and the moms aren't that likely to talk to the boys. So the boys sort of they're on their own, figured out on your own.
Which sort of, is one of the stereotypes for males anyway, that they've got it all figured out, they're in control, they know all this, so they don't need it. And I think of some of the examples of, I'm not sure what kind of sexuality education you had in elementary school, but the one movie. Did you have that though? As a male?
They put us all. They were boys and girls together. This was the Midwest in the '60s, so it was a long time.
Long time ago.
Primitive. We did have electricity though.
Yeah, you did. Good. Yeah. So years before that, the girls went off and saw the movie, and the boys played on the playground. And so now we're changing. We're bringing the boys in for the conversation. So that's good. There are changes. But there's also, they don't need health care. Like females, if for example, they're in a relationship where they need birth control, they usually have to go to a medical provider. So they have to see a healthcare provider so they get information about other things.
So they kind of come into the system in a way. Like they come to Planned Parenthood or they go somewhere and they are handed extra information. So that's interesting.
And we have this idea too that, it's true that the female could get pregnant. So we want to talk. It is true.
Research shows.
Yes. And so we have a reason, but we say that the girls have, will grow this belly or he'll have a baby. And we don't really talk about the consequence for boys. And I think that's an important piece that we say, if you get somebody pregnant and you don't marry them, you will pay 25% of your income for child support. I think it's good for guys to know that. And they're always sort of, I didn't realize that I had that kind of responsibility. And there's lots of stories of people not knowing that they got somebody pregnant and then finding out later and having to be financially responsible for the child.
So it is sort of, I'm certainly familiar with those stories. But it's accurate to say like 25% of your income will go. That's
when you turn 18. There's some, I don't know all the laws.
But that's the guideline or whatever the principle. That is a cautionary statistic there.
Good to know.
Good
to know. So that there is some responsibility, and some connection to wanting to protect yourself.
And that our society will hold you responsible for your behavior.
Right. The other thing that I talk to adolescent boys about is that the way the laws are set up now, if he were to get somebody pregnant, the ideal situation would be that they would discuss it and they would figure out what they were going to do. But if they can't agree, it's the woman's right to decide. So the female gets to decide. So she may decide that you're going to become a father before you're ready to become a father, or she may decide that she doesn't want to continue this pregnancy and you wanted to be a father. So you really kind of lose control.
Or she could give the child up for adoption.
I think that's a little more complicated because if a father wanted,
Oh, is that right?
yeah,
Oh,
it'd be a little more.
Even
so
if
that
they're minors. Yeah.
yeah, I think there's something there, but
yeah,
you're
good
right.
point.
So if she did want to put the baby up for adoption, there would be something with the father connected there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm always saying that because so what you can do is work on changing the laws, but in the meantime, that is how it's set up. So how can you protect yourself from being in a situation like that that might have you become a father when you don't want to be, or when you want to become a father not, or and so my term that I use with adolescent males is keep your sperm. Don't give it away.
It's precious.
That's right, yeah. But as soon as you give it away, someone else can decide things about your life. So don't give it away.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's just sort of, that's how you can be responsible to yourself. And oops, sorry.
No chest pounding here on the show.
Not even in the men's room.
I know.
Yeah, so I think those are important pieces for adolescent boys to know about. And we don't talk about it that often.
No, and I, even though I have been to one of your parent evenings,
Yes.
which was really interesting, and I have, and some of the books and things that we got, I have in fact been looking at from time to time, so that's good. But I still feel like I'm learning a lot just having this conversation. There's lots of little pieces like, oh, that's a useful nugget, and so. Probably I've heard you say these things before, but it's just needing to hear as a parent, needing to just hear, because it's not a conversation that happens very much. Just to hear, be reminded to hear the things you can say. Here's the way you can say it. Here's the reality of the situation.
Yes, yeah, and I get that from parents a lot. Can you just say it so I can just hear sort of what it sounds like, because we don't have good role models for that as parents. Like I was saying before, oftentimes parents will say, no one talked to me.
Right.
If anything, no one talked to me, or there was lots of jokes about sexuality. That as a culture, that tends to be what we do. Yeah. So what is healthy, accurate information about sexuality? What does it sound like? Give me a sentence. So I'll give a sentence just to sort of, oh, okay.
Modeling behavior there,
Right, and I think that when you mention the books, I think that's a really important piece, is reading some of the books and seeing how they're written. And now I might, as a parent myself, I'm in this field, I talk about this all the time, so I might, I'm thinking about this a lot, and it's still really hard. So for someone that doesn't work in the field and doesn't have any resources, you can feel really lost. So I do recommend books, and even reading the books for the kids, so you can see how they use language to talk about sexuality.
Right. Do you want to talk about the books that you brought a little bit? And
I do.
Tell us what you have here.
Yeah, these are two books, From Diapers to Dating and Beyond the Big Talk, which are books about sexual development. So it talks about what to expect at each age group, and then how you can respond as a parent. So those are really useful tools for parents.
Okay, great.
And then...
Ignore the man behind the screen.
I will. The other one, it's so amazing, which is for younger kids, like 8, 9, 10-year-olds. You might have a copy of that
I
as
recognize this one,
yes,
indeed.
Yes. And it's all about families and babies and eggs and sperm, and has some really nice illustrations. And that's Roby Harris, and she's written quite a few books. She also has one for even younger, which I don't have, called It's Not the Stork. So it's for like 3, 4, 5-year-olds about families and babies.
Great.
And then I'm
sure I could learn a lot from these books.
Yeah, I think all of us can, really. It's Perfectly Normal, which is another one of Roby Harris's books, and that's more for puberty-aged kids. I'm just wondering if they're in the library. They may be. I think they might be available in the library.
Yeah. Or I mean, if people wanted to buy them, can they get them through Planned Parenthood?
They can. They also have them at the Toadstool.
And the Toadstool,
Yep.
And also, it occurs to me, if viewers were interested in the sort of conversations you have with parents, if they wanted to be a part of that somehow, is that
they
possible?
could call Planned Parenthood, and we can do a house party, or...
So if they call you and set it up and you guys
Yeah.
arrange it together.
Yep.
People invite their friends. I guess like you said, like a
Exactly.
Tupperware party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You play little games and you
No,
get
we
little
don't play
prizes and no.
No. We're really serious.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
No, we just talk, really just talk, and I give a packet of information so people can leave, and we talk about skills and how you can really talk about sexuality, and they're usually really fun and relaxed, and I mean, it has that feeling similar to sitting here and talking with you, that it's just sort of an informal discussion, and it's not like I have a certain agenda that I'm planning to cover. It's really like, what's on your mind, and then just talking, and then hearing from other parents,
Yeah.
because then it also makes the conversation more public. So you have 3 of your friends there, and now you know that you can talk to them again about this and your own kids.
And how did they or would they talk to their
Yeah.
kids, and how you can brainstorm that kind of stuff. a little bit.
Exactly. Or when my daughter was da-da-da, I did this, or
Right.
yeah. So,
Not so alone. with
Right,
those difficult
exactly.
decisions.
yeah.
So it's interesting, one thing you mentioned earlier about fathers not being as likely to talk with their kids in general, and I think about with their sons maybe in particular. I don't know about sexuality, about what, are there some particular tips or based on your experience of talking with fathers or talking with sons, what works for fathers who maybe want, know they want or should have this conversation with their son, I'm thinking of in particular,
Yeah.
but don't know how to get going with
Right,
it, or
right.
What.
Well, I think William Pollock's work, Real Boys, talks a lot about doing something when you're
Right.
talking to boys. So I think that's good advice for males and females to rake the leaves together, and then you'll have these conversations, or go for a bike ride, to be
Play basketball. or
right.
something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So something active that's sort of goal oriented, or it's just productive.
Is it William Pollock who talks about the going out for ice cream? Because
think so.
you have to sit in the car together
Right.
and drive somewhere.
Yeah.
There's a reward at the end.
Right.
But you're so that gets them into the car. But then you sit there next to each other and for whatever 10 or 15 minutes, and then you have a conversation.
Right, and you're not eye-to-eye
eye
contact,
to
so
eye.
you're right next to each
Pressure's
other.
off a little bit.
Yeah. Now, I've also had students in my class say they hate it when their parents take them
Yep,
in
yep.
the car.
My experience would suggest that's
Right, so in an ideal world, it would all work out, but it doesn't always work out in so many things with parenting. So I think we have to do the best we can
right.
and find ways to talk about it. And other parents have said to me, when kids are resistant to talking, they just say, okay, I just need 1 minute. You don't have to say anything, just listen to me for 1 minute, and then I'm going to leave the room, and just blah, 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 whatever message they want to get out there, and then they leave. And some kids want to talk and ask all kinds of questions, and some kids do not. And in these books, there's the bird and the bee, and the bird loves talking about sexuality and bodies and everything, and the bee, just wants to plug his ears and doesn't want to talk about it. And that's really very similar to kids. Some are really curious and ask lots of questions, and some are very resistant. So you have to work with that.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think in terms of
Yes.
resistance.
Yes.
I mean, this is, from my viewpoint, this is great work. But is there been resistance that you run into? I mean, are there people who are, who don't like the fact that you're going out and trying to have these conversations, or going into the schools and meeting with their children? Or, I mean, have you run into much? I mean, do you feel like is this a welcome service that you and Planned Parenthood provide, or are you running into resistance?
No, I think it's a pretty welcoming community around that, and so I don't see a lot of resistance. There's absolutely some, like there is in every community, but I think in general people really support this work.
Yeah.
Especially the house parties.
Well,
they've been really successful. People really like them, and sometimes I go into existing groups already, so it might be a single parent support group or something, and they always want to talk about this topic. So I don't see a lot of resistance. I feel like I can get my work done.
I'm just I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
If that's, Because I think you are challenging. I mean, you are challenging.
I am.
I think, aren't you? I think you're challenging the status quo a little bit, because we don't talk about sexuality too much. And we have, I mean, there has been, and I think we as a society are moving a little away from this, but there's been the whole just say no thing, that we were supposed to all just say no. And now, I think there's more conversation going on, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think what parents have also realized is when they were having the house parties, they had to invite others. So they had to say, I'm going to have this discussion at my house about sexuality. And the reactions they got surprised them, or how they felt about bringing it up to somebody else. So I think you're right. I think if anything, it's just more of a discomfort than actual resistance. Just sort of, this is awkward. We haven't talked about this before.
We know we need to do this.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
So that seems more of what I see than real outright resistance to it.
Well, it's great work, and we are pretty much out of time.
Oh, we just got started.
I know. It always goes so fast. So tell us, if people want to reach you to arrange for a house party, how do they go about doing that?
They can call me at Planned Parenthood. I have a direct line. Should I give the number?
Sure.
352-0934.
Great.
And I have a voicemail, and they can leave a message, or I'll pick up, and we can set something up. And I'd love to do more house parties. So.
Great. Well, maybe we'll have a whole house party here, and you can facilitate. We'll come into the studio with like a whole family full of people.
That would be good.
A whole room full of different families.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Yeah, and even the other thing is, if people don't want to have a house party but they want to get some information, they can always call me, and I can
feeling some sort of concerns about their children or whatever, they can.
I can talk to them one-on-one as well, of how they can talk about sexuality with their kids. So it doesn't have to be this big house party, because sometimes as parents we're really busy, and it's hard to think of another event to plan and work around. But I do want to figure out a better way to talk about this, so people can just call me and I'll send them information.
Good. Well, it's been a pleasure having you here
Thanks
at the men's room. So we'll have you back sometime, I hope.
Okay, good. Part 2.
Yeah, right. Follow up. So you have been watching the men's room here on Cheshire TV, and as promised, I'm going to say a little bit about our drop-in support group for men, which is every Sunday night at 7 o'clock at 25 Roxbury Street here in Keene. This is sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center, which also sponsors the men's room. And it's just a drop-in support group. All men are welcome. Get there a few minutes before 7. It lasts 2 hours. It's facilitated by trained volunteers. There's no obligation to talk even. Some guys just come and sit and listen, and that's a fine thing too. So again, that's at 7 o'clock every Sunday night at 25 Roxbury Street, next to Aubuchon's Hardware in what's called the Life Arts Center. So maybe we'll see you there, and hopefully you will also join us back here in the men's room next week. And we'll look forward to seeing you. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
You've been watching The Men's Room, sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center and hosted by Damien Licata, co-director of the MMRC and executive director of the Granite State Monarchs, and Forrest Seymour, co-director of the MMRC and a therapist in private practice in Keene. You can learn more about the Monadnock Men's Resource Center, see past shows online, and find our Cheshire TV schedule at mmrconline.org. And thanks for joining us in The Men's Room.